Welcome to Vintage Mike Tales, where every story is painted with emotion, heart, and a touch of fire. This is the story of Sharon Mark, a woman determined to live life on her own terms, and Jeffrey Raymond, the man who taught her that love isn't about control. It's about choice. Thank you for being here. You're not just viewers, you're family. Your hearts keep this mic alive. Now settle in and let us begin. Los Angeles looked perfect from 30 stories up, a tapestry of light and glass that shimmered like temptation itself. But Sharon Mark had long stopped believing in perfection. Her reflection in the office window stared back at her, sleek, controlled, composed. The woman who could negotiate a billion-dollar merger and still make it to Pilates by 7. Her father would have called it poise. To Sharon, it felt like armor. "Stephen's expecting you to call him back." Her father's voice echoed from behind her desk. His tone wasn't a suggestion. It was an expectation, neatly wrapped in authority. "I will," she said, keeping her voice neutral. "Good, the engagement announcement goes live Friday. The board is already celebrating." Sharon nodded, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The city blurred behind her, skyscrapers bleeding into sunset gold. She had the life people envied. Wealth, beauty, power, and yet it felt like a cage lined with silk. When her father left, she exhaled the breath she'd been holding for years. That night in her new apartment, a minimalist penthouse she'd chosen herself, far from the Mark family mansion, she opened her journal. The pages smelled like cedar and rebellion. At the top of the page, she'd written in neat cursive, "The 6 directives: 1. Enjoy a drunken night out. 2. Ride a motorcycle. 3. Go camping. 4. Have meaningless but thoroughly enjoyable sex. 5. Travel the world with nothing but hand luggage. 6. Do something bad." Her lips curved into a smile. For once it wasn't for anyone else. She whispered to herself, "If they want me to be perfect, I'll start by living a little before I say I do." Outside, the hum of Los Angeles pulsed, a promise of chaos, of possibility. She shut the journal and took a sip of red wine. The taste of defiance burned her tongue. The next morning, Sharon's hot water stopped working. A cold shower was not on her to-do list. She called building maintenance. They said they'd send someone up. She expected a polite man in a uniform. What she got was Jeffrey Raymond. He arrived at her door carrying a toolbox and a lopsided grin. Tattoos curled over his forearms, his white t-shirt damp from the morning heat. His jeans hung low on his hips, dusted with a faint smear of paint, the kind that told stories, of long nights and raw creativity. "Miss Mark?" His voice was deep, slightly rough around the edges. "Yes," Sharon replied, adjusting her silk robe with practiced elegance. "The water heater's out." He nodded once, eyes flicking over her space. The marble counters, designer art, the scent of expensive jasmine candles. "You live alone?" he asked casually, kneeling by the heater. She raised an eyebrow. "Is that part of the diagnostic process?" His mouth quirked. "Just making conversation, Princess." Princess, the word hit her like a spark. No one ever dared talk to her like that. "Careful," she said, folding her arms. "You might get fired for that tone." "I don't work for you," he said, glancing up. "I just fix what's broken." There was something about the way he said it, rough, unbothered, almost philosophical, that made her pulse stutter. He turned a wrench, muscles flexing. The sound of metal on metal filled the silence between them. Sharon found herself watching the veins on his hands, the way his forearms tightened when he worked. It wasn't just attraction, it was fascination. She realized with a start that she'd seen him before, on her evening walks, down by the edge of the complex's service alley. He'd paint in near darkness, the glow of a single lamp catching his profile. She'd never admitted it, but sometimes she lingered longer than she should have, just to watch. "You paint," she said softly. He froze, then turned his head, eyes narrowing. "You've been watching me." Her breath caught. "Not watching. Just observing." He smirked. "Sounds a lot like watching." Her cheeks warmed. "You shouldn't leave your studio window open, if you don't want people to see." "I don't mind being seen," he said. "I just didn't take you for the type to look." Sharon didn't reply. The tension was no longer subtle. It filled the air like heat before a storm. He stood, towering close enough that she could smell the faint trace of motor oil and soap. You can stop worrying about the heater, he said. It's fixed. Thank you, she murmured, though she wasn't sure what she was thanking him for, the repair or the way he made her feel awake for the first time in months. As he packed up his tools, she blurted, I need your help with something. He paused, glancing over his shoulder. With what? You planning to remodel? She shook her head, heart hammering. Something different. Now he turned fully, arms crossed, that half-smile playing at his lips. You're serious? I am, she said. I made a list. 6 things I want to do before I... She stopped herself. Before I get married to a man I don't love. He studied her. Before you what? She exhaled slowly. Before I do something I can't undo. Jeff looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. And you want my help? She nodded. You're the kind of man who knows how to break rules. A low chuckle escaped him. You've got me confused with someone who gives a damn. I think you do, she said quietly. You just pretend not to. That made him pause. Something flickered in his eyes. Curiosity, maybe, or recognition. He leaned a little closer, voice dropping. And what's on this list of yours, Miss Mark? Call me Sharon. All right, Sharon, he said, her name rolling off his tongue like a dare. What kind of list are we talking about? Her lips parted in a smile that was equal parts challenge and confession. Things I've never done. Things I shouldn't. He tilted his head, amused. You sure you're ready for that? Try me, for a moment. They just stood there, 2 strangers tethered by something invisible and electric. Finally, he said, all right, I'll help you. But there are rules. She raised an eyebrow. Rules? Yeah, he said, stepping close enough that she felt his breath against her skin. You don't get to back out once we start. And you have to actually live, not just pretend. She swallowed hard. Agreed. He studied her a moment longer, then nodded once. Good, we start tomorrow. Her pulse quickened. Tomorrow? He smiled faintly, eyes gleaming with mischief. You said you wanted to ride a motorcycle, right? When he left, Sharon stood by the door long after it closed, her heart racing. Her world had been all order and symmetry. Glass towers, boardrooms and glossy facades. But Jeff was chaos, and raw, unfiltered, and maddeningly real. For the first time in years, she felt something dangerous bloom inside. Her excitement, desire, freedom. She walked back to her journal, flipping to the list. Ride a motorcycle. She scribbled a small check mark, not for completion, but for courage. Outside, the city pulsed like a living thing, restless, alive and calling her name. And somewhere in that restless night, a man with paint on his hands and secrets in his eyes was thinking of her too. He'd called her princess, but she suspected that by the time this was over, she'd make him believe she was anything but. The sound came first, the deep, husky rumble of a motorcycle engine rising through the morning air like a growl. Then came Jeff. He pulled up outside her apartment complex wearing a black leather jacket and dark jeans, sunlight bouncing off the metal of his bike. The sight of him, all casual danger and quiet confidence, made Sharon's pulse jump. She'd dressed down, or at least what counted as down for her, black jeans, a white tee, hair tied into a high ponytail. Still, she looked like someone out of place in his world. She could feel it, and she hated that she cared. You're late, she called out as she approached. Jeff smirked. You're early. He held out a black helmet. You ever ridden before? No, good. He swung a leg over the bike, the movement effortless. Means you won't think you know what you're doing. She hesitated, looking at the sleek, powerful machine. You're sure this is safe? Not at all, he said, that teasing spark in his eyes again. That's what makes it fun. She rolled her eyes but climbed on behind him. The seat was narrow, forcing her to wrap her arms around his torso. The warmth of him hit her instantly. Solid muscle under soft cotton, the faint scent of paint and cedar on his skin. Hold on tight, he said over his shoulder. I am, she murmured. Not to your pride, to me. She laughed, the sound surprising even herself. You're insufferable. Yeah, he said, revving the engine. But you're smiling. And then they were flying. The city blurred around them. Traffic lights, palm trees, glints of chrome and sunlight. The wind tore through her hair, and the roar of the engine drowned out everything else. The voices, the expectations, the weight of her family's name. She leaned into him, feeling the vibration of the bike through her body. Every curve of the road pulled her closer. She closed her eyes once, letting herself feel it, the reckless freedom, the heat, the strange sense that she was shedding something with every mile. They rode down Sunset, past the ocean until the city gave way to the coast. Jeff pulled off near Venice Beach, stopping by a quiet stretch where the sand met the boardwalk. Sharon climbed off, legs a little shaky, heart pounding. That was insane. Good insane or bad insane? She grinned. The best kind. He smirked. Told you. The breeze lifted her hair as she watched the waves roll in. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't awkward. It was easy, alive. Jeff leaned against his bike, lighting a cigarette. So, Princess, what's next on your list? Directive number 1, she said, facing him. Enjoy a drunken night out. He chuckled. You don't seem like the type who gets drunk. That's the point, she said. You said I had to live. He studied her for a moment, then nodded toward the street. There's a dive bar a few blocks down. Not exactly 5-star, but the drinks are cold. Lead the way. The bar was the kind of place Sharon had only ever seen in movies. Dim lighting, neon signs, and a jukebox playing old soul music. The air smelled like whiskey and nostalgia. Jeff ordered 2 shots of tequila. She hesitated, then downed hers in one go. The liquid burned and she winced. Another? He asked, amused. Absolutely. By the 3rd shot she was laughing freely. By the 5th she was dancing. Not gracefully, not controlled, but real. Jeff watched her leaning against the bar. She was radiant, all warmth and wild energy. Her laughter carried over the music, unguarded and beautiful. He joined her on the small dance floor, hands resting lightly on her waist. She looked up at him, eyes bright. You're not bad at this, she teased. You haven't seen me try yet. She felt his breath near her ear, the warmth of it sending a shiver down her spine. Their bodies moved closer without thinking, swaying to the slow rhythm of the song. It wasn't just attraction now. It was something deeper, an unspoken pull neither wanted to name. Outside, the night air was cooler. Sharon leaned against the brick wall, still laughing softly. I haven't felt this alive in years, she said. Jeff stepped closer, his expression softer now. That's because you stopped living for yourself a long time ago. She looked at him, the laughter fading. You sound like you know something about that. I used to paint for other people, he said quietly. Tried to be what they wanted. Lost myself in the process. You still paint, she said. He nodded. Now I do it for me. That's why I keep it hidden. For a moment the world shrank to the space between them. His eyes, her heartbeat, the city humming faintly behind them. Then she said it, impulsive, bold. Kiss me. He froze, searching her face. You're drunk. I'm honest, she whispered. He hesitated only a second longer before stepping forward. His hand brushed her cheek and then his lips were on hers. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, then it deepened, charged with everything they'd been holding back. Her hands slid to his shoulders, gripping his jacket. His fingers traced the curve of her jaw down her neck, lingering just enough to make her tremble. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. Sharon, he murmured, voice rough. You don't play fair. Neither do you, she said. He rested his forehead against hers, eyes closed. You don't want something meaningless, do you? She swallowed hard. Maybe I don't know what I want anymore. He pulled back slightly, studying her face as if trying to memorize it. That's a dangerous thing to say to a man like me. Then it's a good thing I'm not afraid of danger. He smiled, a slow, quiet smile that made her heart ache. Later, they walked along the beach. The moonlight turned the ocean silver. She slipped off her shoes, the sand cool beneath her feet. Tell me something real, Jeff said. She thought for a moment. When I was 12, I used to sneak into my father's car at night and pretend I was running away. I'd sit there until sunrise. I wanted to know what freedom felt like. He nodded slowly. And now? Now I'm finding out. He stopped walking, looking at her, really looking. You're different from what I expected. What did you expect? A spoiled heiress playing pretend. And what do you see now? He stepped closer. A woman who's finally breathing. Her chest tightened at his words. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. They stood there, the ocean whispering around them, the tension humming like electricity. When he reached for her hand, she let him. They walked until the horizon began to pale with dawn. Back at her apartment, she turned to him at the door. Directive 1 complete, she said with a small, proud smile. He shook his head. You missed the best part. She raised an eyebrow. What's that? He stepped close again, his voice low. You don't complete a directive until it changes you. She held his gaze, pulse racing, and what if it already has? Then she did something she never did. She reached up and brushed, her lips against his cheek, slow and deliberate. He caught her hand as she pulled away. Careful, princess, he murmured. You're starting to blur your own rules. She smiled, the kind that promised trouble. Good. When he finally walked away, Sharon closed the door and leaned against it, heart racing, skin warm. She felt different, lighter, braver, more alive. For the first time, she wasn't just checking boxes on a list. She was feeling again. Outside, the sound of Jeff's motorcycle faded into the distance. But the echo of him, his voice, his touch, his warmth lingered like smoke. She walked to her journal, flipping it open with trembling hands. Next to Directive Number 1, she wrote, Done and unforgettable. Then beneath it, she added a note in small, shaky handwriting. He makes the world feel bigger. Sharon didn't plan to see Jeff again that night. She told herself she'd drop the helmet off, say thank you and leave before her courage ran out. But the sky broke open on the drive to his building, rain slashing sideways, thunder growling over Los Angeles. By the time she reached his garage, she was drenched. Jeff looked up from his workbench, surprise flashing into concern. You're soaked. Get in here. She laughed breathlessly, water dripping from her hair. Guess I can cross-ride in a storm off my list too. He handed her a towel, but his hands brushed her shoulders when he did. The touch burned through the cold like lightning. You're shaking, he murmured. Maybe I'm nervous, she said. He met her eyes, that familiar battle between restraint and desire tightening his jaw. You should probably get out of those wet clothes. Her laugh came out softer this time. That sounds like something bad. He smiled, slow, dangerous. Then maybe it's time you did something bad. Later, after laughter, after a shared drink, after the world outside had gone quiet, Sharon found herself in his arms. When his lips found hers, the noise of the world fell away. The kiss wasn't hunger, it was confession. Her breath caught as his fingers traced the line of her jaw, the air between them turning heavy and electric. Every heartbeat felt louder than the last, and the storm didn't seem so terrible anymore. The first thing Sharon noticed when she opened her eyes was the quiet. Not the usual city hum, not the vibration of her phone, not even the distant sound of traffic. Just stillness. Light slipped through half-drawn blinds, touching her skin like a question. She realized she was in Jeff's loft, his scent, his art, his world. And she was wrapped in one of his old cotton sheets. Memories from the night before flickered through her mind. Laughter, whispers, the brush of his fingers against her skin, the sound of her own heartbeat louder than anything else. It had felt like falling and flying at the same time. She sat up slowly. Jeff was standing by an easel near the window, shirtless, a streak of paint running across his forearm. He was painting her. He turned when he felt her watching. Morning, princess. Her throat tightened. You're painting me? Trying to, he said, smiling faintly. But I can't get it right. You keep changing every time I blink. She pulled the sheet closer, pretending she wasn't blushing. You make it sound like I'm complicated. You are, he wiped his hands on a rag. That's what makes you worth painting. The air between them was soft, tender, but under it ran something more dangerous, the knowledge that this, whatever it was, couldn't last. They ate breakfast on the floor, coffee and toast, surrounded by half-finished canvases. Sharon traced her fingers along the edge of one of his paintings. These are incredible, Jeff. Why do you hide them? He looked away. Because when people see them, they want to own them. They stop being mine. She nodded, understanding more than she expected. My whole life's been owned by someone else. He met her eyes. Then maybe it's time you start taking it back. The words landed deep. Later that afternoon, Jeff tossed a sleeping bag into the back of his truck. What are we doing? Sharon asked, slipping on her sunglasses. You said camping was on your list, he said. I'm making sure you finish it before you chicken out. She crossed her arms, pretending to be annoyed, though she was smiling. You think I'd back out? I think you've spent too long letting fear dress itself up as responsibility. That shut her up. She climbed into the truck. Fine, let's go. They drove until the city turned to open highway, then to desert. The sky stretched wide and endless, the color of possibility. When they finally stopped, they were surrounded by sand, mountains, and silence. Jeff built a small fire, and Sharon sat beside him, hugging her knees, watching the flames dance. "It's strange," she said quietly. "All that noise back home. And out here it's just peace," he finished for her. She nodded. "I didn't know how much I needed it." Jeff leaned back, watching her. "You always talk like you're chasing something." "Maybe the trick is to let it catch you." She smiled faintly. "You sound like a poet." "Don't tell anyone. It'll ruin my reputation." She laughed, the sound warm in the cool desert night. As darkness thickened, the stars appeared, thousands of them, scattered across the sky. Sharon had seen 1,000 glittering city lights, but never stars like these. She lay back on the blanket, staring up. "They're unreal." Jeff stretched out beside her. "They've always been there. You just never looked long enough." For a long while they said nothing. The world felt smaller, safer. Then she turned her head toward him. "Jeff, yeah? I don't know how to go back after this." He didn't look at her. "Maybe you're not supposed to." Something broke open inside her then, something she'd been holding shut for years. She reached out and took his hand. His fingers curled around hers, steady and sure. When she finally turned toward him, he was already watching her. His eyes were dark, full of that same quiet intensity that made her forget everything else. He brushed his thumb along her cheek, and she leaned into the touch. The kiss that followed wasn't wild like before. It was slow, searching, almost reverent, the kind of kiss that said more than words ever could. The world around them dissolved, the stars, the fire, and the desert wind, until there was only the sound of their breaths and the thrum of hearts, learning the same rhythm. His hands traced her curves, exploring the terrain of her body with reverence and fire. The desert wind rose around them, as she moaned wild and untamed, the stars flickering like pulse beats against the velvet dark. They moved together until words lost meaning, until the moon and stars were the only witnesses left. Somewhere between one heartbeat and the next, the night took them both. What happened between them that night wasn't rebellion anymore. It wasn't about her list or her anger or even her fear. It was two people choosing to be seen. When she woke in his arms the next morning, sunlight spilled across the desert, warm and golden. Jeff was still asleep, his arm heavy around her waist. She studied his face, unguarded, peaceful. For the first time she realized she was in trouble. Not the kind that ruined reputations, but the kind that changed lives. She slipped out of the tent quietly, her heart aching in that sweet, confusing way new love always hurts. She stood watching the horizon for a long time before she heard his voice behind her. "You're thinking too much." She turned. "You make it hard not to." He smiled, stepping close. "Then stop thinking." He kissed her forehead, simple and soft, and for a fleeting moment, she believed they could stay suspended in this quiet forever. But the world has a way of finding you, even in the middle of nowhere. That afternoon, her phone buzzed with a dozen missed calls from her father, her assistant, and Stephen. She stared at the screen, dread curdling the warmth in her chest. Jeff noticed the change in her face. "What is it, my father?" she said. "They've announced the engagement." He froze. "Without you?" She nodded, voice trembling. "He said it was better for appearances." Jeff took a slow breath. "So that's it? You go back and pretend none of this happened." "Jeff, I don't," he said quietly. "Don't make excuses for them. It's not about them." She stepped closer, desperate. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," he cut in. "You live in a world where people get bought and sold. You just don't want to admit you're part of the deal." The words stung. "That's not fair. Neither is loving someone who's going to walk away." The silence that followed was heavy. Sharon felt the sting of tears she didn't want him to see. She reached for him, but he stepped back. "Go, Sharon. Go fix your world." She wanted to scream, to fight, to make him understand that she didn't want the world she was being forced back into. But all she could do was stand there as he turned away, the desert wind pulling at his hair. The drive back to Los Angeles was a blur. The city lights that had once felt like freedom now looked like bars on a gilded cage. When she got home, her reflection in the mirror was a stranger's, the polished heiress again, every trace of desert and wildness washed away. But when she opened her journal, the pages were still waiting for her. Under the last check directive, she wrote, "Directive 3, done," and it changed everything. Then, after a pause, she added in smaller handwriting, "I think I've fallen." Los Angeles looked smaller from the penthouse window. Sharon had once loved that view, the perfect grid of streets, the gleam of ambition stretching to the horizon. Now it only reminded her of how far she'd fallen from herself. The tabloids lay scattered across her desk. Mark heir to wed business tycoon. Her father had given interviews. Stephen had smiled for cameras. Her name had been turned into a headline without her consent. She hadn't heard from Jeff in 2 weeks. Every time her phone buzzed, her heart leapt before reason caught up. Every night she replayed the look on his face in the desert, hurt, proud, final. She told herself to forget him. Instead, she found herself whispering his name to the empty room. The engagement party was held at a hotel that smelled of roses and power. Diamonds flashed beneath chandeliers, and everyone looked polished, rehearsed. Sharon wore a silver gown that felt like armor. Stephen leaned close for the cameras. "You look stunning," he said. She smiled automatically. "You look strategic." He laughed, not realizing she meant it. As speeches began, her father spoke of legacy and alliances. Sharon's hands trembled on the stem of her champagne flute. The sound of polite applause swelled around her, suffocating. She couldn't breathe. As her gaze wandered, she caught a flash of color through the open archway, a familiar shade of blue and gold that made her breath falter. On the screen, a reporter stood in front of a crowded art gallery downtown. Local artist Jeffrey Raymond debuts new work tonight, his first public show in years. The collection, titled Freedom, explores the tension between confinement and release. Sharon froze. A photo of Jeff appeared behind the reporter, standing beside a painting that took her breath away. It was her, not polished or posed, her eyes half closed, head tilted toward unseen light, bare-shouldered, painted in strokes of gold and dusk. The caption read, "The moment she breathed." Sharon was already moving. She placed her glass on the nearest table, lifted the hem of her gown and walked out. Past Stephen's confusion, past her father's outrage, past the flash of photographers who couldn't believe what they were seeing. Outside, the night air hit her like salvation. She pulled off her heels, flagging down the first cab she saw. "Downtown," she said, breathless. The Raymond exhibit. The gallery was small, tucked between warehouses, its windows glowing warm against the dark. People filled the space, artists, students, strangers. Sharon slipped through them until she saw him. Jeff stood near the back wall, hands in his pockets, eyes tired but alive. When he looked up and saw her, the world stopped moving. Neither spoke at first. Then he said softly, "You came. I saw the painting." He smiled faintly. "You weren't supposed to." "I think I was," she whispered. They stood in front of The Moment She Breathed. Sharon reached out, fingers hovering inches from the canvas. "Why did you paint me?" "Because you made me remember what it feels like to be free." Her eyes filled. "And now?" "Now I'm trying not to ruin it." "You didn't." She turned to him. "You changed me." The words trembled between them, raw and real. Outside, rain had started, thin, silvery threads against the pavement. Jeff followed her out onto the sidewalk. The city lights reflected off the wet ground, turning everything into blurred color. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly. "Your world's probably losing its mind right now." She laughed through a tear. "Let it," he studied her face. "You sure?" "I'm done pretending, Jeff. I don't care about the name, the company, the marriage. I care about this. About you." He shook his head once, half disbelief, half relief. "You don't know what you're giving up." "Yes, I do." She stepped closer, rain gathering in her hair. "I'm giving up everything that never made me happy." He reached for her then, hesitant, as if afraid she might disappear. When his hand found her cheek, the world quieted. Their kiss wasn't wild or hurried. It was slow, deliberate, a promise built out of all the words they hadn't said. Rain slid between them, cool against the heat of their skin. When they finally parted, she rested her forehead against his. "I wanted to do something bad," she murmured. "I didn't know it would feel like coming home." He smiled, eyes bright in the lamplight. "Then let's make home wherever we land." Weeks later, the newspapers caught up. Mark Hare calls off engagement. Leaves family business. Sharon didn't read them. She was too busy helping Jeff hang canvases in a sunlit studio by the beach. Sometimes he painted. Sometimes she worked remotely for charities her father had ignored. Mostly they just lived, messy, imperfect, happy. One morning she woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of waves. Jeff sat on the porch sketching. She padded out barefoot, wrapped in one of his shirts. "What are you drawing now?" she asked. He tilted the pad toward her. A simple sketch, 2 rings intertwined. A note underneath, Directive 7, love without apology. She blinked, smiling through sudden tears. "Is that a proposal?" "Depends," he said. "Is that a yes?" She laughed, kissed him, and whispered, "Always." They married quietly on the beach at sunset, just a handful of friends, barefoot in the sand. Jeff painted their vows on a canvas instead of paper, to live, to feel, to choose each other again and again. That night, as husband and wife, their intimacy carried a new weight. Every movement was slow, tender, reverent. Their bodies moved together in perfect rhythm, not wild, but deliberate, savoring every sigh, every gasp, every whispered promise. His hands traced her curves, exploring the familiar landscape of her body with both reverence and fire. She gasped as he entered her, each touch, each thrust, a silent declaration of love, desire, and the bond they shared. The beach wind whispered around them, carrying their sounds into the night, while the stars and moon watched quietly, witnesses to their passion. Their release came like a gentle storm, overwhelming, yet serene, binding them together in a union far deeper than the flesh. It was physical, emotional, and spiritual. The morning drifted in soft and quiet, the kind of morning that seemed to breathe with the ocean. Sharon stood on the balcony of their beach house, a mug of coffee in her hands, the salt air brushing against her skin. Down below, Jeff was painting again, shirt sleeves rolled, sunlight on his shoulders, the same calm rhythm that always anchored her. She smiled. For the first time in a long while, her world was simple, hers. Then she heard it, the low crunch of tires on gravel. A black SUV slowed to a stop at the gate. She froze, breath catching in her chest. For a moment she thought she imagined it. But then the door opened and her father stepped out. He looked smaller than she remembered. No entourage, no bodyguards, no polished power. Just a man who'd lived too long behind walls he'd built himself. Their eyes met across the distance. Neither spoke. The sound of waves filled the silence between them. Finally, Sharon set down her mug and walked down the steps, bare feet touching the sand. When they met halfway, he spoke first, his voice quieter than she'd ever heard it. "Sharon, I owe you an apology." She didn't move. "Didn't make it easy. I thought I was protecting you," he said. "I thought control meant love. But I was wrong. I was afraid to let you choose your own life." Her eyes softened. "You don't need to explain." He shook his head. "I do. Because I see you now." He looked around, at the little house, at the open sky, at the art drying in the sun. "You built something honest. You didn't run from who you are. You became it. I'm proud of you, Sharon." The words hit her harder than she expected. For years she'd dreamed of hearing them, and now they were real. Her throat tightened, and all she could do was step forward and pull him into her arms. He hesitated, then held her, long and tight, like a man finally releasing a lifetime of regret. When they finally let go, he smiled faintly. "Mark Enterprises is still yours," he said, "but this time run it your way. No boardrooms. No conditions." Sharon nodded through tears. "I will, on my terms." "That's how it should have been from the start," he murmured. A sound behind them, soft footsteps, the door opening. Jeff appeared in the sunlight, wiping his hands on a rag, a little paint on his jaw. Her father turned, meeting him with quiet respect. "You must be Jeffrey." Jeff nodded, a hint of cautious warmth in his smile. "Sir," her father extended his hand. "Thank you for helping my daughter find herself." Jeff shook his head gently. "She did that on her own. I just got lucky enough to witness it." Her father's laugh was soft, real. "Take care of her." "Always," Jeff said. He turned to Sharon once more, his eyes glassy with light. "You've made your own world here. Don't ever let anyone take it from you." Then he walked back to the car, the wind tugging at his coat. She watched him go, not with sadness but peace. For the first time, she didn't feel like she'd lost a father. She felt like she'd finally met him. When the car disappeared beyond the hill, she turned. Jeff was standing at the porch, one hand resting on the frame, the other still holding that old paint rag. "Everything okay?" he asked. Sharon smiled, a real easy smile. "Better than okay." He held out his hand, paint-stained and warm. She took it. He pulled her close until her head rested against his shoulder. Together they looked out at the water, the sky stretching wide and open above them. For Sharon, it wasn't the end. It was the beginning she'd written herself. And that's the journey of Sharon and Jeffrey. Two hearts who found freedom, passion, and each other against all odds. If their story stirred something in you, leave a thought, a heart, or a whisper in the comments. Let the love live on. Remember, true love isn't about control or perfection. It's about courage, choice, and never letting go of what sets your soul on fire. Vintage Mike Tales.